Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And we welcome back in our Make Me Want to Holler series, all things Black people from Turtle Island to Britain and elsewhere. We excitedly welcome back a fan favorite of ours, a returning champion, Dr. Jared Ball, who is professor of Africana Studies and Communications at Morgan State University at Baltimore, Maryland. He's been a lifelong Black leftist, indie journalist, media critic, and geocritic, and part of Black Liberation Media, where he co-hosts the Remix Morning Show, Saturdays with Renee, and his own I Mix What I Like, which he also does on his own channel. He's got a book with that title, and also a website with all of his work and more. Co-editor of A Lie of Reinvention, correcting Manning Marable's Malcolm X, and he's the author of the superb anti-capitalist Black leftist book, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, which is in its second edition. He's our guest for the hour or so. Jared, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. Appreciate you.
Likewise, and just before we get started, don't forget, folks, to donate to One Plus One, and please always share widely across social media and to your emails and elsewhere. Help us overcome the far right algorithms and the monopoly Western corporate state media has by sharing past and present episodes, our playlists, and Facebook sometimes blocks me from sharing. So again, when you guys share widely and like us widely, it helps us immensely. And now on to the topic at hand. So, Jared, before we begin, yes, well, once more, just how's everything going with you, the BLM family, and whatnots? And
I mean, everything is as good as could be expected, and holding on, trying to produce good work and content for folks to be inspired to organize and develop some alternatives. So yeah, no, I mean, but yeah, all is as good as could be expected over here. Thank you
well,
very much.
well, Jared, you're doing wonderful. I've been following a lot of the content that you've been producing on your own YouTube channel, and it's brilliant. You're always you're always knocking it out of the ballpark, as they say, the Fela Kuti of journalism. So,
Oh wow. That's fun. Okay. All right.
so Jared, let's okay, let's get into the conversation at hand now. The last time we had you on, Jared, it was to talk about how evil the music industry is, and that if you are an anti-capitalist and if you are a radical leftist of any kind, the music industry is the perfect perfect case study of why everybody should be a socialist, or certainly very left leaning and so forth. And one of the people's well, actually, let me ask you this question before we sort of continue on with that conversation we had, which is one of the most widely watched episodes, one of the most popular episodes, not just of One Plus One in general, but of you, as a regular guest on One Plus One. It's become one of the most widely popular episodes, and certainly the one I've been most proud of to share, every now and then. But before we talk about somebody that we talked about on that last show, which was Lyric Corn. Before we talk a little bit more about him, uh, just in general, I just wanted what's been your response to 50 Cent's vendetta against Diddy, and showing how much of an evil, not just an evil black capitalist he is, but just an evil man he is, and so forth. And yeah, anyways, I just want your response on that before I give a little bit of my response, and then we can stop talking about that waste of space.
No, I mean, look, I watched it. The
You did.
series. Oh, I did, absolutely. And but I think that it's first of all, 50 Cent is not criticizing Diddy for some advanced thinking, politically radical, thoughtful reasons. This is in many ways a personal vendetta, a personal problem he has with Diddy. And of course he is himself a happy black capitalist. So this is not some uh, you know. And what I've actually been thinking about it, if to the extent I have, is that it's to me an interesting another sort of case study in narrative creation, narrative warfare, and framing. Because again, as bad as Diddy has been as a human being, and it's apparently been well documented in this, at minimum, I'm sure it's been much worse over the years. The discussion and the series, of course, and the broader discussion is largely ignoring the fact that in terms of what Diddy went to trial for, it wasn't for any of his bad behavior, it wasn't for his physical abuse of the women in his life. It wasn't for the stuff I've been hating on him for 30 years, which is a misappropriation of the mixtape tradition, and people like legendary DJs like Ron G, who really initiated that the beginnings of R&B over boom bap hip hop beats that Puffy took advantage of and turned into the rise of Bad Boy and Mary J. Blige and all of that, and then turned into the shiny suit era of hip hop and the bling era, and has always been in place at his Puffy in the work he's produced to negate more radical forms of the art, to co-opt radical forms of the politics involved in what was at the time hip hop activism and hip hop journalism and hip hop scholarship, doing stuff like vote or die, encouraging people to vote for the Democratic Party, doing all this silly. Just there's so many things that for so long people like me have been hating on Diddy for. In fact, people like my small crew, to the extent that it's just not. I mean, we started talking about hate and initiated even for years the hate awards as a response to Diddy, saying every time there's some sort of criticism of him, that's just hate and jealousy. So, our thing was to adopt the moniker and say we are haters and we hate everything that prevents revolution, which Diddy represented as well as anybody. So I'm saying all that to say that all of the things that he's actually done and deserves to be, if not tried for, but held up in the court of public opinion and destroyed for, had nothing to do with the trial. So at the end of the series, even Diddy's series has to end with two of the jurors saying, "Yeah, you've outlined all these horrible things that Diddy has done, but that wasn't what he was on trial for. So we weren't judging him based on," and that's why he got a relatively light sentence. And a lot of people seem to be confused about that. And my point and really what I'm trying to get at is that, not to defend or justify, is to say this is how easily our popular opinion can be manipulated and dragged away, because the discussions about Puffy should have been about not only, and starting with, of course, the abuse of Cassie and other women, but then his relationship after that, his relationship as an executive, as a music mogul, in helping exploit his own community and destroy whatever potential was left in popular or hip hop at all to represent the radical aspirations of most of the people in the community. And all of that gets ignored in favor of the salacious stuff around he's a horrible person who did all these terrible things. And at the end of the day, what he was on trial for was paying consenting adult sex workers to travel and perform adult consenting sexual acts. So again, I'm not saying, again, this is not to say he's a good person. I'm saying all of the things that he should have been held up for and condemned for were ignored in favor of the sensational. And even the beating of Cassie that the whole world gets to see on video is only used to prop up the public opinion against him for these, what I think are absurdly ridiculous charges. So I'm saying, by the way, as someone who is a wannabe committed leftist, if not revolutionary, I don't want to condone, and I don't want to be just blindly on the side of the federal government and its police agencies busting down anyone, but particularly black people's doors, and tearing up the house, terrifying the children, and whatever we think of Diddy, his kids had nothing to do with this. And then for what? I mean, it's meanwhile, if we're talking about all of these horrible misconduct, there are far bigger fish to fry that nobody seems to be, I mean, it's like, so anyway, all I'm really trying to say is at the end of the day is most of my work interested in targeting, or making an attempt to get Black people, the African diaspora, focused on a certain set of politics to move in a certain set of political directions. Uh, the Diddy stuff is, and to the extent I've been involved in a critique of hip hop and the environment and the media environment, it has been to talk about how that environment is set up by design to walk us again away from those same sets of politics and ideas. And yet here again, even as in his downfall, Diddy is still playing the role of distracting the narrative away from what is the role of the music industry? How does it function in this society? Who are the actual players that run? Because at the end of the day, Diddy owned no labels. It's again the equivalent to the drug trade. Yes, there are plenty of horrible bad actors, Black, brown, and others within the ranks of the drug trade. But at the end of the day, they're not the ones capable of maintaining a $1 billion drug trade that can somehow circumvent, until they want to shoot down, relatively poor people in Venezuelan boats. They can circumvent the entire U.S. military apparatus to bring in billions, a cotillion tons of dope every day. Everybody's high. Everybody's high all day long in this country and in Western Europe. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody is struggling to get high in the United States or Western Europe. And yet the equivalent here is that these Venezuelans in some boats we're trying to say on their way to Suriname are the reason that everybody's high in this country, and Diddy doing whatever he was accused of doing is really why the industry is so bad, and the industry exists, and the industry has been exploiting Black and brown people and even poor white people forever. Like, all right.
That also gets back to I just want to briefly mention something about 50 Cent, but isn't this really like the pot calling the kettle black? Because isn't he an isn't he also guilty of exploitive business practices? Hasn't he had, fallouts with members of G Unit and the Game and publicized feuds because he apparently has ripped them off because he had his own record label, which was a subsidiary of Aftermath, which is a subsidiary of Universal. And isn't he,
again? I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Isn't he literally guilty of the same awful business practices Diddy's guilty of? But the bigger scandal is that all of this is perfectly legal in the music industry, since the music industry does not, since there is no collective bargaining or anything like that. It's not at all modeled the way the Screen Actors Guild, the Writers Guild, and so forth.
That's right.
So
that's a good point. And then, by the way, to add to that really good point is that this is all being run on Netflix, which is obviously no good actor in terms of the media environment, and now it's becoming a bigger behemoth in the whole player. So there's all kinds of problems with this whole thing, whether it's the pot calling the kettle black, or the pot calling the kettle black within the white kitchen that is housed within the white settler colonial mansion of, you know what I mean? So like, yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely.
And then not only that, Mr. 50 Cent, Mr. What Up Gangster?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought gangsters weren't supposed to be snitching on each other. I thought they weren't supposed to be saying, "Hey, Mr. Trump, Mr. FBI man, this is what Diddy's been saying about you," to trying to pull another brother down. I thought when it came to gangsters, if you want beef, you take it to the streets, not.
No, I mean, that's again. I don't know. What do I know? I'm not a gangster. I've never played one. I've never been one. I've never portrayed one in the studio or elsewhere. So I don't know. I don't know. yeah, that's I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer for
Well,
that.
anyways, but just the point I'm trying to make is that 50 Cent is really the pot calling the kettle black,
Yeah,
and look, I don't have Mamdani mania, but the fact that the guy tried to bribe Mamdani, the incoming mayor of New York, because he doesn't want his taxes raised and so forth, and threatened that he would move out of New York if
right.
Mamdani and his socialism come. So he's a MAGA trash black person, and fuck him. That's just all I want
Okay.
to
All
say.
right. All
And that's why,
right.
and that's kind of why I'm trying to avoid watching his documentary on the
Yeah,
city, because
I'm not
it's many
recommending it.
that
I'm not saying I'm proud I watched it. I'm not saying you have to watch it for your, I'm just admitting that I absolutely watched the whole thing. I just sat down for 4 hours and watched the whole thing. And it was well done. It was well produced. The production team he has on it is very good. And whoever he got to I don't know, bribe or pay or steal that footage that he got out of Diddy's camp is you know. But everything you're saying is right,
Well,
and I
I,
don't
I
have.
I look forward to the next Netflix series or whatever overpriced streaming website does their expose on 50. So, and to quote
You
Jay
never
Z,
know.
and to quote Jay Z in response to 50 Cent's how to rob an industry. I
Hmm.
think 50 no, Jay Z said, "I'm about a
I'm
dollar. What
about a
the fuck
dollar.
is
What the
50
fuck is
cents?"
50 Cent? It was a great bar. Now, and allegedly, as the story goes, they were also backstage together. And Jay-Z said, he went up to 50 and said, I appreciated your track. That was a nice track, but I got to get you back. So there was a little bit of showmanship and orchestration and all of that too. I've said for a long time. I remember when it first came out. To his credit, I thought How to Rob is as brilliant an entry into the music business as there's ever been. And I thought the track was well done. It was hilarious. And I don't know why, some people got offended, but I thought I thought it
Well,
was
that's well,
great.
well, well, that, well, well, that, well, that's exactly why it took him forever to get a leg in the music industry. Was actually because
Well, but I think that was a mistake on their part. And then, but he was, while he was working to get in the industry, he was killing it in the mixtape game. Like the entire hip hop world knew about 50 Cent and was like, where is this dude? Like, when is this dude going to get signed and all this? So that he made the industry listen and he forced his way in. And to his credit, I'm not, I thought it was a brilliant way of doing it. By the way, I also thought Jay-Z's response was brilliant because he's saying, I know what you're doing and I appreciate the hustle, but you said my name. Therefore, I'm going to go out here and Summer Jam stage you. And that's just how it works. And I think that's great. And hip hop, I think, is in that way better off for it. And again, were this not taking place within the context of this particular industry, I think like, I love all that stuff. I'm not mad at any of that. Um, but it's the spillover effect politically that becomes the problem.
exactly. You got Diddy, who props up the Obamas and the Clintons of the world, and you got 50, who props up dodgy Donnie Trump, and that's a perfect segue to this question, which is, oh, actually, wait one moment. Oh,
Are you frozen or am I frozen?
I think we're both frozen. Hold on one moment. Okay, all right, I think
Yep,
we're
I
back.
got you back. Yep,
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, actually, wait one moment. Okay, good. My connection is working again. Sorry about that. Anywho,
no
that's a
problem.
perfect segue to this question. The last time we had you on, we talked about Leor Cohen, who was the senior executive of Def Jam Records, and now I believe he still is the head of YouTube Music.
Hmm.
And I thought it was, and of course you talked to us last time about why he should not be celebrated the way he is when he goes on Drink Champs with Nora and DJ FN. And I wanted to talk a bit more about Lear Cohen. I thought this was interesting. So I was watching a very short video about Ja Rule's hit "Put It On Me," the remix with Vita and Lil Mo. Great love song, I love it. And The late Irv Gotti, was talking about how Leor Cohen did not want Ja Rule to release "Put It On Me." Irv defied him, said it's a great track. Ja does not just want to be another, macho hood rapper. He wants to show this soft side of him. There's a market of the R&B fans. These two worlds often overlap with one another, and Leor Cohen did not want Ja to do that track and to release that remix. Irv defied him, and then basically it became a big hit, but Lear Cohen intentionally only gave them a few copies because he thought it was going to be a flop. It ended up becoming a big hit, so it ended up, like boomeranging him because he had to make more of 1 million copies now because it was such a popular single. So I thought that was interesting. And I also thought that it's kind of interesting because LL Cool J, he has, his own commercial side. He's done his own sort of, he's done several rap songs which are very commercial friendly, R&B friendly, sort of his love songs, and he's a big artist on Def Jam. So I just thought it was interesting that Lear Cohen did not want Ja Rule to kind of replicate that. What's your response to that? And that again, that kind of vindicates what you were saying last time, where you have this rabid white Zionist saying, "No, this is not how you can communicate with your community. No, this is how you're supposed to communicate with your community. And me and my people, we're going to be the ones to shape all of that." Your response?
So I don't remember the details of that specific incident, but again, the point for me would be somewhat as you described it, that why is Cohen in a position to make that decision in the first place, and for what purposes? Because he certainly had no problem endlessly promoting groups and acts that would talk at length about harming one another and other members of the Black and brown community. So why would he, if he's, if to the extent that that story is accurate, then it just to me speaks to again the desire among those in power to promote certain versions of blackness that are more acceptable to white audiences. Because again, when you even phrase the question about Cohen becoming an intermediary between black rappers talking to the black community, that's not why he's there. He's there to be the intermediary to make sure that the black people who speak to the broader white audience and purchasing community are saying things that white people want to hear black people saying. White people are not interested in black people talking to one another about love and dating and marriage and family. They're interested in hearing black people talk to one another and about one another in the context of killing and violence and abuse and sexual depravity. So that to me, that would be how I would interpret that, again, to the extent that that story is recounted accurately. That would be the point. And if, and also to my point that these industries do not exist to primarily earn money. They exist to manipulate public opinion, and in this case, primarily of the white consuming audience. So, what value is there in promoting black love to a white consuming audience? There's no political value to that, because then the logical extension is, if these are decent human beings, why are they persistently in unequal conditions and mistreated? These industries don't exist for that. These industries exist to manipulate public opinion. And it's interesting that, and I just want to share something with you. I literally just, as we were getting on this call, I had just gotten put onto an article that I just downloaded and just have only read the first few pages of. And it's what it is, though, is about a 1940s, late 1930s rather, NBC radio programming series that was led by Harold Laswell, who was one of the foundational figures in U.S. mass communication studies and research, and in the study in the institutionalization of the study of propaganda in the United States. And Laswell was part of a liberal wing of the white ruling elite who wanted to manage the potential dangers of democracy, and was part of a collective of white ruling elite leaders of this country who were constantly concerned with public opinion and limiting it. And I just, so if I can, excuse me, I just want to share this
Yeah, go ahead.
one quote from this article. The article is called Human Nature in Action, Harold Laswell, NBC Radio, and the Psychotherapy Program for the American Masses. And part of the point was that radio was just becoming the new mass medium of the country. And the companies like NBC that dominated the airwaves wanted to, because of the foundational rules of broadcasting in this country, which required that the licenses that are supposed to be publicly owned licenses would be given to privately held companies, with the idea that those privately held companies would do something for the public good beyond just making themselves a bunch of money. So NBC wanted to promote a bunch of series like this one to say to the country, look, we're not going to just take advantage of our citizens, we're going to produce some good and wholesome content. But Laswell was concerned with what this article says was, quote, the peculiar nature of American individualism subjected middle class citizens to immense psychic strain. This was because middle classes were expected to serve the germinating bed of ambitious social climbers, as well as be the custodians of morality. So Laswell is saying we have this new burgeoning democracy with this new mass medium of radio, and there's a group of us who rule this place that want to make sure that the people we're imposing our brand of democracy on don't lose their minds and go too far. So as he said, so as one of the few paragraphs later says, these figures, meaning these leading white men of the liberal wing of the ruling elite, like Laswell, did not reject democracy as such, but in light of a growing body of evidence that appeared to suggest that the human psyche was ill-equipped to handle rational decision-making, especially at the collective level, they advocated for various forms of expert management and administrative control of democratic societies, which would be informed by the increasingly sophisticated findings of the natural and social sciences, end quote. And what are they saying? We're going to use the study of the social scientific fields, sociology, communication, psychology, philosophy. We're going to use these fields to study how to manipulate public opinion, because as he says in here, and this is interesting how they equate this. That the concerns, Laswell believed these psychic tensions had reached a breaking point. If not mitigated, they risk spilling over into public life in unpredictable and destructive ways, ranging from individual expressions of sociopathy to collective revolutionary uprisings. So they equate, on the one hand, sociopathy, being sociopathic as a response to the pressures of society, or people, the equal concern for the Laswellian crew is that people would have a response to this that was revolutionary and would call for radical politics to address the pressures that this capitalist society was putting on them. So my point in all of that is to simply say, for 100 years now, this is literally 100 years ago, just in this one incident, there have already been, for 100 years, it's been an overt, expressed, institutionalized concern that what the ruling elite do to people in this country might push them towards revolution. And to mitigate against that, to protect against that, they must control the content of the dominant narratives that pervade popular culture, popular media. So when I bring it all the way back to 2025 to say Leo Cohen is not concerned about black people talking to black people with love or whatever. He's concerned with how white people are going to be met with a message coming out of a community that is meant to only provide entertainment, sexual pleasure, dystopian fantasies, whatever, blame for all the, that they're not, we don't want to hear about black people talking about loving each other. We don't want to hear about love songs, and we don't want somebody, I need Ja Rule to be a thug because that's black masculinity that I can sell to white audiences. White audiences don't want to see this super thug Mandingo falling in love with a black woman and loving a black woman. So, if he's calling her a bitch, we'll promote that all day. That's a club hit. That's a club hit. But if he's talking about I want to date you and marry you and boo you or whatever language we're using, well, you're gonna be my boo, my wifey, whatever language. No. No. White people don't want to hear that. They want to that kills the fantasy. So that's at least, again, all that to say, that's how I interpret all of this. And why I also say that Leor Cohen types have to be involved in these processes, because that, what Laswell and them were talking about, that is the function of mass media. Do not let people become, true, they don't want a bunch of people out here as sociopaths because that's unmanageable. They want good, compliant consumers but they definitely don't want the revolutionaries. And I think it's fascinating that this article, that they were saying that's how those are the bookends. They equally.
But then I want your response to this, and then I have to ask a follow-up question about how the Leor Cohens of the world don't want macho black men to talk about peace, love, and happiness and whatnot. But then before I ask that follow-up question, I want your response then to this. So apparently, Leor Cohen sabotaged Cisco of the popular R&B group Dru Hill for wanting his own management from Baltimore, your neck of the wood, in charge of the marketing and handling of the release of his second album, Return of the Dragon. Cisco, as I'm pretty sure mostly our white friends, our white audience, those who do watch both of our programs, he did that stupid song, the thong song and so forth. It's a great album, though. The album is good. The album Enter the Dragon is good. That song is stupid, so just have to put that out there. Now, Cisco, in his much anticipated follow-up album that came in about 2001, for defying Cohen, Cisco accused the label Def Jam of deliberately not promoting the album and saying to the corporate press, mainly the black ones, that he was gay or bisexual at a time the community in America and elsewhere at large was very queerphobic, and his second album became a flop. We've never really heard about Cisco since then. He still tours every now and then, Dru Hill reunions. I want your response to that, because I thought that was
listen, I've heard. Listen, this is why people from one of my favorite rappers, Freddie Fox, aka Bumpy Knuckles, and others have called Leor Cohen out for years, and as a problem. So as someone worthy of even hostility. But so again, I don't remember or know the details of that particular incident. But again, it fits within, it is consistent with the history of the music industry, if not this specific incident with Cohen, and that if you are not promoted, so this is something that I and others have argued for a long time. The reason why that initial contract artist signs relinquishes ownership of the material over to the labels is not just for the purpose of promotion, but also for the purpose, if necessary, from their perspective, of shelving it. So if you own it, you are the sole determinant as to whether that song gets promoted at all, or that artist gets promoted at all, or gets put on the shelf. And if you don't promote it, or if you just limit the budget, it's the same thing with films. If you don't get a 2,000, 3,000 theater release, they're playing with you. They're not supporting you. If you get dropped off in a couple of cities, a couple hundred theaters, maybe the studio is saying we're not interested. And that's all it takes. And if you don't get the payola to end up on the top of the Spotify playlist, or to get, back in our day, the thousands of spins on radio every week, that's all paid for by the label. That's all. And now if you don't have a deal with Apple Music, YouTube, or Spotify, or if you're not signed by Sony, Universal, or Warner, you're not going to become popular. You might, I mean, you're not going to sell that much. You're not going to do that much. So yeah, it makes sense. And if Cohen is upset and thinks, an artist is trying to take too much control over their art, all they have to do is make a couple calls. All they have to do is hold on to a couple of those envelopes with the cocaine and the cash and the Super Bowl tickets, and you're not on a playlist, and that's it. So it wouldn't even be difficult, I think, for someone in Cohen's position to do that. It would probably be pretty easy.
That's unbelievable. Before I ask that follow-up question about the kind of image the Cohens of the world want to sell to people outside of our community, I then have to ask this question. I mean, we were already talking about Diddy and 50 Cent's hypocrisy. I then have to ask them this question, which is, what's your overall assessment of Russell Simmons? Is he someone we should celebrate for his contribution to the subculture that is hip hop? If your answer is no, why not? And what do you think of the Me Too Harvey Weinstein allegations that Drew Dixon and others have made against him? Drew Dixon's story is interesting because in a documentary I saw about her from a really good documentarian who's done a lot on the Catholic Church abusing people and the amount of sexual assaults that happen on college campuses and whatnot. Drew Dixon also accused L.A. Reid, yes, that L.A. Reid, of sabotaging her career because she declined to have any sort of a sexual relationship with him. And when she tried to bring him artists like Kanye West, John Legend, he was not interested. Your response?
So I've long before any of this, it's similar to the Diddy thing. Long before this, I have been critical of and hating on Russell Simmons for largely the same reasons. That he is one of the first reasons why the hip hop community, that hip hop became so commercialized from the very beginning. He has played every role in marketing to white audiences and expanding the reach, and thereby diluting the potential content to reach those audiences. And back in the day, I think it was called Life in Debt. Or am I making? No, no. I'm think I'm complaining that with that documentary about Jamaica. But there's a book he wrote
Yeah.
years ago. I read Russell Simmons, one of his early books, and it was, again, it was one of those early sort of hip hop black capitalist fantasy books and all he wanted to do was be a black Warren Buffett. All he wanted to do was have the private jets and to be a mogul and do all of this. And and very little was done to respond positively to all the criticisms. It keeps getting lost in the history that there was this late 90s, early 2000s hip hop activist struggle where hip hop people in what was being called the hip hop community and the hip hop nation, something I've always been critical of, but where at least it was happening, and people were trying to raised questions about the industry and what was happening to the culture, and Russell's name was appropriately dragged a lot in those spaces, and he never, to my knowledge, made any positive response to that. So he never had any positive intervention in terms of the criticism of payola and playlists and corporate consolidation and the 1996 Telecommunications Act that helped all of this consolidation of the media industry. Like, Russell wasn't there for all of that. He was, if anything, a voice condemning those critics. He was part of that early co-optive leadership of that I talked about in terms of Diddy and Vote or Die, and let's bring everybody to the Democratic Party, and
the right wing of the Democratic Party, not the Dennis
that's one of
the Bernie Sanders of the world. So
not the exactly not the even the left wing of the Democratic. You're right. The right wing of the, so yeah. So and I saw that same documentary where those accusations against him were laid out, and I find them to be compelling, and I have no problem believing that they're all true. And since he's not offered, to my knowledge, any meaningful defense or explanation, and seems to have been, he denies this too, but hiding out there in Bali. Um, the worst part, that's terrible for me to say it that way. The selfishly, one of the worst parts of hearing Drew Dixon's story was that I didn't realize that she had been the real creator of what was one of my favorite songs, and at one point was literally going to be my wedding song, which was the Mary J. Method Man remake of
You're All I Need.
You're
Marvin
All I
Gaye.
Need, the Marvin
Marvin
Gaye,
Gaye.
Tammy Terrell original. So and when I heard that Drew was saying her abuse at the hands of Simmons destroyed that whole experience and that she didn't properly get credited or paid for it, it's kind of messed up my appreciation for a song that to this day I can almost still rhyme at least the first verse out of memory. Like that's like a that was serious. I was gonna walk down the aisle to that. I was like, this is the perfect wedding song. Like, why? Later, I, found Donny Hathaway and corrected that. But that's another,
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm not mad at that choice though. I still think had that been the song, Shorty, I'm here for you anytime you need me for real. Good me in your world, believe me. I mean, come on, man. Who doesn't
Exactly.
want to? Doesn't that make you like it makes that's and then to find out that this chump, you know, took that from her and took more from her, like it's
And
just
then,
so it's pathetic, man.
and then the L.A. Reid story
And that's more to it.
is equally more stomach turning. Yeah. So yeah.
And then again, after all the legitimate major concerns, is that part of what she was also saying is that they're more interested in being male abusers than even producing good music. Like they're not even interested in the art that they claim that they're interested in. Here I am, I'm bringing you these legends, pun intended, and you don't even care because I don't want to give it to you like that. Like that's so you're willing to just destroy black art and black music and the culture for the people because I'm not going to let you take advantage of me. That's like it's like on again, that's not the top of the layers of concern, but underneath those top layers, that's in there. That's like these are the people that have been in charge all these years that we're supposed to believe are the most talented and the best custodians of the art. And it's like, and all it takes is a woman to not let you abuse her, and you're willing to destroy all of that. Never mind what you do to her, but you're like, I'm out with, I'm like, my goodness, these people but they exist in an environment going back to the foundations of the music industry and then to the current even apparatus that runs it. The context it basically demands this because all that the industry wants is a distorted dystopian view of the black, brown, and abused people that produce this art that create billions of dollars for the white elite that benefit from the initial conditions that produce that form of the music in the first place. So it's madness.
But then I got to ask you, and let me gently push back against
Sure.
but why would the okay, kind of going back to the Ja Rule story, to Ja Rule's story, Def Jam had somebody like LL Cool J who could be as macho and grimy, and then also do very thoughtful, nice R&B love songs. One of his more commercial R&B songs, I really like it because of its feminist message and so forth. So why can LL do that, but not Ja Rule? And then at the same time, I mean, Def Jam. I mean, for every thoughtful, I mean, for every time they had a Public Enemy or a Third Base, they had their commercial stuff and their kind of apolitical stuff of just posturing, we're from the hood and stuff like that. So why would they? So why would they not want to have Ja Rule do it. And of course, now, and of course, later on, Ja Rule's music, love it or hate it, I personally like it. Went very commercial and was very successful for them. So why would the hip hop industry
Look,
behave?
I don't. This is all speculation, and I'm just working through what my interpretive frame tells me to. But so, I'm happy to push back. I'm not claiming to have definitive proof here. But my initial response would be that again, if the if the goal is to not promote a version of blackness that doesn't support white hate of black people and abuse of black people, then LL's prior success with producing hits with love songs would be evidence as to why you would not want that to happen again. And that would be my same point in response to Public Enemy. That, Chuck D,
Okay, I get it.
you see what I'm saying? Like they're like, because again, white audiences will buy it. White audiences in general they're not born into some particular hate of black people loving black people. So and I don't think it's difficult to think that a white teenager listening to LL sing a song about a black woman would I don't think it would be hard for that white teenager to turn that symbolically into somebody that they would want, white or otherwise. So that would be why you would stop it. You'd say, wait, that shit worked. We don't want them doing that. Same thing with Public Enemy. And again, I always point back to this, the one interview years ago that I had with Chuck D. He said in the story of the rise of Public Enemy, he said, our success was an accident. That, and again, if you remember, some might not, but the very first tracks you got from Public Enemy were not particularly political. One of the earliest ones, My 98 Booming with a Trunk of Funk and stuff like so when they got signed, Chuck D told the story that the label just said, you're on the label with the Beastie Boys. They're going on tour. We need an opening act. Go on tour with the Beastie Boys. And at that point, they had started rebranding them, reframing their politics and their work. They go on tour. They're doing Fight the Power. Maybe not Fight the Power, but their early, maybe Don't Believe the Hype. I can't remember the ordering. Bring the Noise, maybe.
But what you're saying is,
and what I'm saying is that the white audiences that saw them fell in love with them, and the world fell in love with them. So the industry is saying, wait, we want white audiences to fall in love with an anti-black version of black people. We don't want them falling in, like, they'll love whatever black people do. If black people go out here and fight the power, the world will fight the power. That's why they're like, get that shit out of here. So that was my point. And Chuck's point was, when we come back from the tour, all these white folks are in Europe is like, let's go, Black Revolution. We're loving it. And we see them on tour with the Beastie Boys, who are, while they're doing their drunk, frat boy thing, they're still friends with Public Enemy. So if we saw Public Enemy say, fight the power, and then we get to hang out with the drunk white boys and Public Enemy's cool with them, this must be all great. We got the frat boys, we got the black. So Black Revolution looks like a party at the frat house to European. So the music industry is saying, damn that. Absolutely not. We got to get everything back on.
But then
again, that would be my.
Okay. So that's fascinating. So doesn't this kind of go? But if we talk about the broader world, the broader political world, is that why there always has to be severe limitations into just how left you can be? So
yeah,
you can be so. For example, you can be a Bernie Sanders and talk about raising people's minimum wages at McDonald's, and we have to get money out of politics and so forth, and we got to fight the oligarchy. But I'm only talking
about... Got to vote for the Democrat.
Exactly. And
look, back in the day,
socialism at home, socialism, reformism at home, not that anti-imperialism stuff, especially Palestine liberation.
No, all of Bernie's foreign policy was just as bad. Back in the day when he was running, all of his foreign policy was still just as bad. Like, he wasn't. Listen, look.
The point is that the capitalist world gives you just a little bit of freedom sometimes to be a little bit left, but just not far.
Again, well, my point is, if you're not left of the Democrat,
so you can allow a Public Enemy and you can even allow a Boogie Down Productions, but we don't want an over
But they weren't allowed.
production
That was
of
so, but that's sort of my point. They weren't allowed. Public Enemy's fame was a mistake. And then people forget they were already wiped out by the early 90s. They were already unpopular by the early 90s. They had gone through the whole supposed anti-Semitism scandal with Professor Griff. Their albums in the early 90s stopped selling, and eventually they were done. And now, and 20 years later, Chuck D is hanging out with Blinken and doing State Department stuff.
with Meyer
So
Cohen as well.
yeah. And
Alongside
now Eric Sermon is doing AI with Leo Cohen. So but this is my thing though. When I was paying more attention to this in the early 2000s, I remember vividly there was the Tony Yayo album was going to come out, or no, or now I'm confused. Was it Young Buck? One of G Unit's satellites was coming out with an album on Interscope, and he had a song on there called "Fuck the Police," and Jimmy Iovine told him, "You got to take it off the album."
yes, and
And when
apparently,
but my point was, at the time, if you listen to the lyrics, this was not some radical "fuck the police." It was a song very much saying, "I am going to continue to sell dope and fuck the police." It wasn't a Jay Dilla "fuck the police." It wasn't a Dead Prez "fuck the police." It was a I just want to be left alone to be a dope dealer, fuck the police. And even that, Iovine said is too much for an album. But then the rest of the album is, I'm a dope dealer, fuck you, I'm gonna kill you, bitch, suck my dick. It's like the whole out. So that's all fine. But if you say fuck the police, even in the context of just being a dope dealer, not some revolution, you got to get your music gets snatched. So what that, again, the reverse is obviously true. It is fine for you to talk about killing your own community, raping your own community, abusing your own community, beating up the women, beating up the LGBT, the queer, all of that is great. As long as you do not say fuck the police, and as long as you do not say we're moving left of the Democratic Party, you're fine.
But that reminds me, a mutual friend of ours, I believe, Solomon Kamajan of Your World News, who did a great documentary about hip hop, addressing some of the things that we're talking about. He
Mm-hmm.
he has mentioned, I don't remember what the context was, but there was some, I think it was a hip hop summit or something like that, and there was a young brother, a young unsigned underground rapper, who literally said that Jimmy Iovine said that we cannot have protest songs on our albums and stuff like that, because that's too political. But it's not too political. But I talk about being a gangster, the misogyny, the queer phobia, and whatnot. So in that respect, should Jimmy Iovine also not be celebrated the way he was in the Defiant Ones alongside Dr. Dre?
That was supposed to be something I was going to watch, but I never could bring myself to get to it. But no, I don't. Again, I don't think. No. So the short answer is no. He's not. These are not heroic people. These are not even decent people. And yeah. So no, he shouldn't be celebrated. Although I'm not familiar with that particular story about this summit, so I don't.
I'll have to ask.
All I can say is that it's consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Solomon, brother Solomon, to give me a copy of that, and I'll send it to you.
Sure.
But it's great. But yeah, no, it's crazy. It's scandalous. So then, in a nutshell, you can only have. So in a way, it kind of replicates that whole idea of a monopoly. You can only have one soft rapper. You can't have a couple of millions soft rappers that push back against the machismo ism. And as you say, Public Enemy, that was an accident. BDP, that was an accident, which explains also why they've been bouncing from one indie label to another indie label. But it now comes all full circle because they also prop up the right wing of the Democratic Party and all that.
But again, remember, like we have to remember BDP again, like BDP and KRS by the early 90s are not irrelevant, but they're not dominant. And then remember by the mid 90s, I want to say like 94, 95, somewhere around there, KRS does a track with Puffy. He does
Uh-huh,
Step into a World with Puffy, which is so it's like which to me was the beginning of the collapse and the sign of the collapse for me that KRS, who's supposed to have been the bastion of the the culture, is now doing tracks with the guy he should be condemning. Like J. Rue at least did a track called One Day, produced by DJ Premier, where he talks about and he calls him out by name. He talks about going and reclaiming hip hop from Diddy, and he's a little less direct when he brings up Suge Knight's name. I remember that part, but he talks about because his line was something like, "We're going to snatch up Puff because he's the one getting hip hop. He's the one getting hip hop drunk and fucked up," or something like that. He was like blaming Puffy appropriately and saying one day, he's going to get dealt with and we're going to reclaim hip hop. And that was the movement I was on. That was where I was. That was the time I was on. And then here comes KRS doing a song with Puffy, and I was like, "You got to be kidding! You got to be kidding!" He's the shiny suit rapper. You the hoodies and Tims. I slept on the subway because I was homeless, and now you're. I was like, this is so yeah. It
but
was
Jared, but Jared, gotta pay the bills.
look and look and I but by then but that's where but that was the precursor to KRS and the Alex Jones era. People forget that. And then man, KRS was rocking with Alex Jones heavy for a minute in the 90s. Absolutely. And then KRS.
But is that because of the whole like that stupid Second Amendment stances, which a lot of leftists also endorse?
It's because part of it. Well, I'd have to speculate, but part of it, I think is because is that KRS in a moment of marginality and a lack of access sees this guy with this huge platform, and there is some overlap in that world in terms of a critique of the federal government and its impact on society and stuff. Like there is a brief overlap between even real revolutionaries and the lunatic white right. But if you're not careful, if you're not paying attention, if you're not grounded in a certain politic, and if you're chasing a bag, and that's how you end up calling Eric Adams the hip hop mayor. That's how you end up, hanging out with whatever, all of these
Yeah,
mistakes that they keep making.
Obama,
Obama, all of
Clinton.
it.
Now, can I squeeze two questions out
Yeah,
of you?
come on. Yeah, we can go a little bit. Yeah, let's go.
Okay, second to last question. You often, and we're going to get deeper into this the next time I have you on. But I love what you often say on your show, which is, "Why do I like what I like?" Which apparently your media critic mentor taught you. So let's.
No, 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 no. Just quickly, he was not a mentor. He was not a media. He was a professor. I want to say of literary criticism. I had an undergrad. We were not on the same page politically.
Okay.
Couple issues, but he was not a horrible human being, and he did raise some very important issues and questions, and he did give me the phrase he used to say that I've always appreciated and credited him with is interrogate your preferences. So I always simplify it by saying, how do I know what I know and why do I like what I like? Which, but that's, yeah. So I just want to be clear. He was no.
Okay. But that's a perfect segue. That being said, that's a perfect segue to this. Destiny's Child.
Oh,
You want to
wow.
talk about the music industry and how wrong the music industry is? Listen to this story. So Beyonce and her dad, who was the manager of Destiny's Child and was the manager of Beyonce before she went overly sexualized. Destiny's Child was a 4 to 5 person group, Beyonce and Kelly Rowland, and then there was Latoya and Latavia. Latoya and Latavia wanted their own separate management. I don't know the details as to why, but they wanted their own separate management. And Matthew Knowles, I believe that's Beyonce's father's name, was
Mhm.
not having that. In the midst of having this dispute and so forth, they found out rudely that they were dropped from Destiny's Child when they turned on the television, flipped through the channels, landed on MTV, and the song Say My Name, which those two are the vocalists on, they've been replaced by two other singers. Now, here's where it gets even more messed up than that. We, the MTV generation, the BET generation, and the people who have grown up loving R&B music like Destiny's Child, we side with Beyonce and her father, and they make themselves as if they're the victim, hence why they do the song Survivor, when in reality, we should be on the side of LaToya and Latavia, who did not get who did not get Grammys for those songs that Beyonce and Kelly got. Your your response to that, your response to that, and another great example of how rotten the music industry is.
So again, I've never been that much of a fan of Destiny's Child, so I didn't pay that much attention. But and this is certainly not the worst version or worst story of the music industry that has occurred in terms, but it's again consistent. What I heard in your description was a return to the standard dominant narrative of if you are seeing me, it's because I've worked harder, I've am more talented and deserve it. So I don't know what happened with them. I don't know. I don't even know what the claimed stories or versions that were. I don't know what was even said as to why this happened, but I'm assuming part of the narrative was these two didn't work as hard. They weren't as talented. They didn't put in as much effort. They were late. I don't know, whatever it was. Uh, um, and therefore whoever you see left standing is going to depict it as I'm a survivor, and if you're not there you just don't get heard, and and if you do get heard, and this is something that is often talked about even in terms of the Laswellian crew that I was talking about earlier, that once you establish the dominant narrative, everything else has to compete against it, even if it's true, or even if the narrative itself is false, and even if what others are saying is true, they still have to dominate. They have to go against it. And I always just bring up that example of Jesus. If I say the name Jesus, even if you know better, everybody has to, usually most people have to walk themselves intellectually back away from the blonde hair, blue-eyed, long, image that has been imposed on us, even if you know that could not have possibly been what he looked like, even if he actually existed, which I admit, all right. So whatever. My point is that once the narrative is established, even I have to do it. And I have all these anti-narrative beliefs or non-beliefs. So you say Jesus, I got to walk myself through the deconstructed. No, he wasn't that. Before I get to, so that's the whole point. And so yeah, but in terms of, but it does also remind me of something else that I've also often tried to say, that the person you see is the least powerful person in the process of the production of that media product. So when you see Beyonce sing, she's the least powerful person in the process of determining that song not only being written, produced, made, but then being wherever you would be able to see it. Now, obviously she's not the least powerful, but what I'm saying is she's not really in charge here. There's a whole apparatus and a whole industry that she still has to appease. When I used to be paying more attention, like for instance, when Jay-Z came out with the documentary around the Black album.
Yeah.
I used to point this out all the time because I loved that album and I was a big fan of Jay-Z. But as a contradiction, because he was a mess politically. But in that documentary, this is him at the height of his career. Already a half a dozen platinum, this is gold, that's tours, this everywhere. This is his swan song album. And in the documentary, you still see him having to take the finished product to that big boardroom table of like 30 all white faces and play them the record. And they have to be in the room saying, oh, because if they don't, There goes that marketing budget. There goes that payola. There goes those
And look,
videos and the
but, you know, it's interesting, and you know, just thinking about how you say that, you know, hip hop can only have one of this kind of person, that the industry can only produce this one. That kind of reminds me of, I mean, it's even worse in Hollywood because the only black director who's supposed to apparently like speak on behalf of all of us is Spike Lee. You're only allowed to have like one or two or five black actors
yeah.
maximum. And then even then, now like you know, now it's mostly British people who are playing American roles.
Well, look, I bring it up all the time. You know, the first of all, I still don't think there's any black person in Hollywood that can greenlight a film. So I still don't think, you know, even with the Spikes and the Denzels and the whoever else is in there, you still don't have anybody black that can actually say this thing that's written on this page will end up on that screen. And so that's one thing. But oh, I just lost my train. What was the example you just brought up there? Oh, I just
Oh,
lost
about how like
my.
Spike Lee is like the only like example. He's
Oh,
the
right, the
only
star
black
system. That's right.
director
Yeah.
that's allowed.
So I know I probably say this all the time, but the well, this is the old star system that evolved out of early Hollywood, and it's just easier to make hits when you have already established stars that you can just plug into everything. So there's only just a handful. And I remember this is really old now, but this one of my favorite books early on in grad school was talking about the movie industry, and they were talking about the star system, and they said it was something like it was something crazy. These are not exact. Don't quote me on this, but it was something like 40 or 50% of all of the box office revenue in the 2000s or in the 1990s came from films starring like seven white men, something like that. You
I
know, it was
wouldn't be
like Bruce
surprised if that
Willis,
was true.
Tom Cruise, Schwarzenegger, and like a couple others. And it was their films that drove like half the industry. And why? Because you create a star and you just put him in shit. And then you're guaranteed at least some level, at least that was the thinking of success. And that's why, you know, Schwarzenegger's doing stupid kindergarten kids movies. And of course all the Terminators and all the other stuff, but then they got to put him in all the, you know, some silly rom-com with a kid or something, you know, like it's, you know, like it is.
But you know, it's also funny. You know, it's also funny
So,
is
oh, and I'm sorry. So if that's with the white actors, then to your point, there's only going to be
only a Spike
Denzel,
Lee, only a Denzel, or a Will Smith.
Sam Jackson.
But you know, we come full circle. Final
Yeah.
question. I have to get I have to get your response to this one. So my final question is this, which I want your response on is so I recently saw a documentary on I was watching several documentaries on Nas, and I was watching a documentary celebrating however many years it was of Illmatic. I thought this was interesting.
Oh man,
And
yeah.
I thought this was interesting. The documentary was funded by the Ford Foundation and other semi NGOs and nonprofits. And in this documentary, which celebrates Nas Illmatic for all the reasons why we should be celebrating it, end of the documentary, hip hop studies is introduced to Harvard, that overpriced university that gets us into crippling debt. And Henry Louis Skip Gates, the director of the W.E.B. Du Bois Institute, is there in the press conference.
Look, look.
Jared, what's your response? Especially, I remember watching a review you did of Colin Kaepernick's
Mhm.
Netflix thing, and you said as you paused and you were critiquing when Kaepernick says something about W.E.B. Du Bois, you said, "Keep the names out your mouth," and that's how I feel about Henry Louis about Henry Louis,
Henry Louis Gates is
especially when I
skip.
had your colleague of Black Liberation Media, Dr. CBS, you know, plugging her book, and then we got into talking about W.E.B. Du Bois, and she said to me that this was a guy who end of his life, was a member of the Communist Party of the U.S., was driven out of the U.S., was blacklisted by the NAACP. So how can a guy like Henry Louis
Louis
Gates be the
Gates. Yeah.
director of an institute named after him? So yeah.
So no, it's perfect because remember,
So to quote what you said, keep the names out your mouth.
so look, look, Henry Louis Gates has the English literary critic. Okay, he's not an Africana Studies or Black Studies scholar. He's not a historian. He's not, he's none of those things. He is a literary critic who has become basically the dean of Black Studies because he's built a career off of condemning any form of Black radicalism he can get his attention put to. So he was attacking the African-centered community in the pages of the New York Press back in the 90s. He called himself, quote, an intellectual entrepreneur, which I've always defined and interpreted as him admitting he's here to sell our history to the highest bidder, and that's how he gets himself all this enormous amounts of funding and Harvard positions after having been at Yale, after having produced a book not too long ago in which he talks about he wanted to produce something that would protect today's Black elite from the ideological, quote, bullies who would want to tell Black people how to be Black and to have some Black radical consciousness. So he wanted to protect against that. This is someone who openly condemns Kwame Ture as being irrelevant, and yet is well placed and platformed to have every bit to say about every bit of Black history in this country, including a forthcoming PBS documentary which pretends to tell us about how Blacks and Jews have had this wonderful relationship over the years, and he's going to look and he's going to determine for us how to interpret that history.
I commented on that video, and I commented on the video saying the following: "No, please no. Just please no. Why are you doing this? Please don't do this."
So I say all that to say that when I saw the Stillmatic documentary, I believe it was called, or the 20th anniversary of Illmatic, or whatever it was called, I went and saw it in the theaters when it came out. And I was furious. So first of all, Nas is one of the best MCs of all time. His new album with DJ Premier is fantastic as an album, as a boom bap, well lyricized album.
And for a brief period of time, he gave Jay-Z a much needed bloody nose.
So actually, Ether, he did win with Ether, but I actually have a different opinion of that battle that is more biased in terms of Jay-Z, who I actually still think is a better MC. But that's a whole. It doesn't really matter. I'm not proud of my defense of Jay-Z. Believe me. So I'm not here to die on that hill.
Well, but we'll get into that in the future in another time. So.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. Again, I'm not really interested in defending myself on that. It's just a bias. It's not. I just I don't Pharoah Monch is the best MC of all time. He's the GOAT. Now, I will fight and die on that one. So we can come back and debate that one. However, I'm saying all that to say that what my point about Nas is that Nas is often gotten a lot of undue credit as being a deep thinker, in large part because of his early references to the Greeks, learning something deep from the Egyptian teachers, and having some sort of elevated consciousness relative to the Puffies and and all of that. And he did. And I also have had I've made a number of hip hop enemies off of this one. I've also felt, and I thought this was appropriate, especially given the point that you're making, and I'm going to make in a minute, that Illmatic, as great an album as it was, is overrated in terms of its praise of the MC Nas, and not of the fact that the album has to be one of the best ever in terms of the array of producers. To me, what makes Illmatic a classic is you got Premier, Pete Rock, Large Professor, Q-Tip, and I'm probably forgetting somebody, but you got those four alone. You would have to be whack to not have a great album. Yeah. So Nas is not whack. So he was, of course, going to get a great album. But after that, let's be honest, like there's been great music, but Jay-Z was right. Is it Uchi
One was
Wally
nah,
Wally or
the
is it
other was
one
nah,
Mike?
one was nah, the other was El Mag. That's a one hot album every 10-year average, and that's so lame.
Lame. And he was right about that. Is it Black Girl Lost or Shorty Owe You for
That's what we
Ice?
all thought. That's what we all thought. Having been a bigger Jay Z fan compared to Nas, we all thought,
Now,
dude, nigga is over with.
now what Nas
But
did with
but then but, but
Ether.
then but then with Ether, and then with Stillmatic, Nas had his comeback, and
He
I
had his comeback.
Nas is
And then, of course, what do they do?
several good
No. But of course, what do
that.
they do? What do they do though? What do Jay-Z and Nas do? They come back and collaborate on a track called Black Republican, where they talk about how they're praising one another for their black capitalist endeavor, which is the point I was going to get to here in a minute. On Nas's new album, where he's praising cryptocurrency and Ethereum, which he had to deal with for a previous album. So he's back to promoting this nonsense. So Nas is not some grounded black radical thinker. He's a brilliant MC who has a level of talent and thoughtfulness that rises above sort of the bare minimum, and that's it. And because of that absence of grounded politics, he could be dragged into a situation where, if you remember in that movie, and I remember it vividly, there's a scene where they're scanning the books on Nas's father's bookshelf, showing where Nas would have gotten all this brilliant black knowledge that he put in his early albums, which really isn't there as much as people think. I mean, these are not, but he's showing all these books. And I don't remember the exact name, but it's like Dr. Clark and Doc Ben and all these black radical scholars. And then he talks about how wonderful it is to end up in this Du Bois Center with Henry Louis Gates, whose whole career, the only reason Gates is there, falsely attaching himself to the name of Du Bois, is because his whole career had been built condemning the very books on Nas's father's bookshelf. So to not call that out as a contradiction shows the audience who's paying attention, Nas is not that deep. Nas is not politically grounded in these traditions. Otherwise, he would have been the first to say, hell, he would have written an ether level verse condemning Gates for reaching out to. How dare you reach out to me?
But Nas is just another recycled version of what KRS and Chuck D have been doing these days.
And who doesn't want an invitation to Harvard?
KRS-One, saying that Eric Adams is the hip hop mayor. Chuck D going with fucking Leor Cohen, talking about using hip hop to liberate the world because America has such a great track record, past and present. And this is also the same Nas who was also saying to folks, "Go support Obama," and look how wonderful that turns out.
So that's so again. So I just want to say here that as we is to sort of wrap up for this one, this is sort of why I'm saying, like, we should appreciate the artists for their skills and for the music that they move us with and all of that, and we should support them and whatever we want to do. But we really should not be looking to them for a political analysis. And that's why I can say that despite my bias in favor of Jay-Z, I was never grounded in his politics. So listening to his music never I would at least say it limited the negative impact on whatever my analysis of the world would be. So that's what I'm, because artists, these are not political radicals. These are people coming out of whatever communities they're coming out of, whatever backgrounds they're coming out of, who are mostly young people at the time that they hit big, and they're just trying to have a career. And if your focus is trying to have a career and craft in developing your craft, you're not spending the requisite time you need to in organized spaces and politically educated spaces. You're not studying. You're not in this group or that group, and that's just natural. So that's why we can't. I think it makes perfect sense that somebody could at one point drop us a few intellectual gems and then end up hanging out with Skip Gates as the sort of crowning jewel of his career. We need to build the movements that would protect Nas, the future Nas's from that error. And we can't expect the artists to independently make that on their own, or anybody else for that matter. Because again, Harvard is filled with not only former, potentially radical rappers, but former potentially radical scholars. So, so the draw is powerful if one is not grounded in a certain principle politic, or just not good enough to get that invitation, and therefore we don't have to worry about it.
I would say, I'll also just say, in closing, I'll just say in closing, in a world, in a world filled of Nas and Jay Z's and KRS-Ones, be a Jaziri X.
All right, fair enough. Fair
And
enough.
in the worlds, and in a black world filled with Skip Gates, be a Dr. Jared Ball and a Dr. CBS.
That's okay. There you go. That's a little
Oh,
bit of an
take that
improvement
compliment,
there.
Jared. Come on. Well, we were all right, folks. We were joined on this edition of One Plus One, your place for convenient truth telling and myth busting. In our this was another one of our Make Me Want to Holler series, our special Jared Ball edition, because Jared is a fan favorite, and we have an entire playlist of all of Jared's past
Oh,
appearances and my favorite appearances on Jared on other platforms and favorites, BLM moments and so forth. So let me remind folks, Dr. Jared Ball is a professor of Africana Studies and Communications at Morgan State University of Baltimore, Maryland. He's been a lifelong Black leftist, indie journalist, media critic, NGO critic. He is part of Black Liberation Media. Check that out. And he co-hosts the Remix Morning Shows and the brilliant Saturdays with Renee and his own I Mix What I Like, which check out that website, check out that channel. It is brilliant. And the book of the same name also gets, it's Christmas time and Hanukkah time, so gets the book he co-edits it, A Lie of
and Kwanzaa.
and Kwanzaa too, of course. So folks, check out A Lie of Reinvention, Correcting Many Marables, Malcolm X. Do get the brilliant tour de force that is the myth and propaganda of Black buying power, which is in its second edition. And again, folks, donate generously to One Plus One if you can. Donate to BLM. Donate, become a Patreon to Jared and so forth. Help us overcome the far right algorithms and the monopoly that the Western corporate state media has by sharing all of our contents wide and present. And Jared, all my best until then. I look forward to having you back on, I hope soon. And once more, thanks for taking the time to come on Saturday for this.
No, anytime. I
And
appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I look forward to being back
and
anytime.
peace if we're only what?
Only peace, only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Good night and good luck,
Peace.
folks.